anytime there's a wave of violent attacks in the name of Islam, the Western media, instead of really getting to the bottom of the problem, they start trying to convince the world that Islam is a wonderful religion of peace and tolerance. So interestingly, the more violent Islam becomes, the more the Western media and, of course, Western politicians will defend it. And so it's actually in the interest of all Muslims. These terrorist attacks, they end up helping all Muslims. If you're a terrorist, then the terrorist attack obviously helps your ideology. It puts people in more fear. But if you're a peaceful Muslim who doesn't even like jihad and violence, it helps you as well, because now you have the media proclaiming your peaceful, tolerant religion and giving you a platform to tell people how wonderful Islam is. And we're going to look at an example of that, and we're going to see why it's such a problem. CNN recently posted an article by a young woman named Theresa Corbin, who calls herself a Muslim feminist. Now, if you're like me, you're wondering how that's even possible given what Islam teaches about women. How can anyone say, I am a Muslim and a feminist? These are completely contradictory ideologies. But Theresa Corbin doesn't think so, and CNN put her article on the front page of its website. So according to CNN, they're Muslim feminists, and CNN was all too happy to share Corbin's reasons for converting to Islam. And the article amounted to just, hey, here's why you should believe in Islam. But let's go through this. Let's go through some of Corbin's articles so we can see why this is very disturbing. You have a major news network at a time in history when, people are having their heads chopped off, women are being horribly oppressed, Yazidi women are being raped regularly in accordance with the Quran, and all CNN can think to do about it is to promote Islam even more, and to do so through outright nonsense and deception. Let's look. The article begins with Corbin saying, I am a Muslim, but I wasn't always. I converted to Islam in November 2001, 2 months after 9/11. There were actually lots of converts to Islam after 9/11 for many different reasons. One was after 9/11, there was so much bombardment on the media and from politicians trying to convince everyone that Islam is a wonderful religion of peace and tolerance. Lots of people bought into that. And of course, if you want attention, if you wanted to be different, then that was a great time to convert to Islam. And Corbin is one of these people who converted to Islam after the terrorist attack. She writes, I was 21 and living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It was a bad time to be a Muslim. Really, it was a bad time to be a Muslim? You're having your religion endlessly praised on the media? But after 4 years of studying, poking and prodding at world religions and their adherents, I decided to take the plunge. So she says that she spent 4 years studying. We will, in a moment, see how much she really learned about Islam during those years of studying, and this was 13 years ago. That was 2001, so we'll see what she's learned since then. She writes, I'm the product of a Creole Catholic and an Irish atheist. I grew up Catholic, then was agnostic, now I'm Muslim. My journey to Islam began when I was about 15 years old in Mass and had questions about my faith. The answers from my teachers and clergymen, don't worry your pretty little head about it, didn't satisfy me. And we can wonder how many people she actually sought out for answers if she couldn't find anyone to give her any reason to think that Christianity is true. But she continues, so I did what any red-blooded American would do, the opposite. I worried about it. For many years, I questioned the nature of religion, man, and the universe. I wouldn't have any objections so far. But watch what happens when she actually gets to Islam. She writes, after questioning everything I was taught to be true and digging through rhetoric, history, and dogma, I found out about this strange thing called Islam. I learned that Islam is neither a culture nor a cult, nor could it be represented by one part of the world. I came to realize Islam is a world religion that teaches tolerance, justice, and honor, and promotes patience, modesty, and balance. And here's where you know that someone didn't learn about Islam by reading the Muslim sources. you can see throughout Corbin's writings that she has no clue what's in the Muslim sources. She has no idea. And so this is very interesting. Where was she learning about Islam during her studying? She was either learning about it through some Muslim friends or acquaintances and didn't bother to question anything they were telling her, or she got some some of the standard Western apologist works and got Islam through them. But she certainly didn't get Islam through reading the Muslim sources. How do we know? Well, she says that Islam is a religion that promotes tolerance. You certainly don't get that idea from the Muslim sources. Let me read a couple of verses here. Chapter 5, verse 51 of the Quran. O you who believe, do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are friends of each other. And whoever amongst you takes them for a friend, then surely he is one of them. Surely Allah does not guide the unjust people. So according to the Quran, you are not allowed to have Christian and Jewish friends if you are a Muslim. There's an exception in chapter 3, verse 28 of the Quran, if it's to deceive them into thinking that you're friendly because they outnumber you. In other words, if you're a Muslim in an area that's dominated by Christians or Jews who are more powerful than you and outnumber you, then you're allowed to pretend to be peaceful and tolerant, even though you just want to subjugate them. So that's what Islam teaches. That doesn't sound tolerant to me. Chapter 9, verse 29. Fight those who do not believe in Allah nor the last day. Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day. Notice that doesn't say fight those who are attacking you. It doesn't say fight people in self-defense. Fight those who do not believe. This is a command to fight people based on what they believe. If Islam commands its adherents to fight people based on their beliefs, what do you mean by tolerance? I would like to know what you mean by the word tolerance. If I walk outside and I say, hey, what do you believe? Oh, you believe that? Now I have to fight you. Now I have to subjugate you. Now I have to make you pay me money, which is what the rest of the verse commands. Christians have to pay Muslims tribute money in order to acknowledge their inferiority. But how is that tolerant? On what planet is that tolerant? That's what you find when you actually read the Quran. And certainly nothing anyone could consider as tolerant. Chapter 9, verse 73, O prophet, strive hard against who? Against evil, wicked people who are oppressing others, against people like Hitler or something like that. Who are you to strive against? O prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites and be unyielding to them. And their abode is hell, and evil is the destination. You have to fight against unbelievers and you have to fight against hypocrites. Now, can you think of any groups in the world today who are waging jihad, and that's what the word there means. It's a version of the word jihad. Wage jihad against unbelievers and against hypocrites, people who claim they're Muslims but aren't really following the teachings of Islam. Can you think of any groups out there in the world today who are fighting and subjugating unbelievers and hypocrites as well? I can. And it ain't Theresa Corbin. It's a group called ISIS. That's what you get from the Quran. It's justified by the Quran. So I don't know where you're getting the idea that this is tolerant. Chapter 9, verse 111. Surely Allah has bought of the believers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. Here we have what fighting in Allah's way means. You slay until you get slain. You keep killing until you get killed. I don't know what you want to call that, but I wouldn't call it tolerance. Chapter 9, verse 123. O you who believe, fight those of the unbelievers who are near to you and let them find in you hardness, and know that Allah is with those who guard against evil. Here you have a command to fight unbelievers who are near to you. Again, it's unbelievers. You're fighting people based on their beliefs. Chapter 48, verse 29. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Those who are with him are severe against disbelievers and merciful among themselves. This is part of the definition here of a Muslim. Those who are with Muhammad are severe against disbelievers and merciful among themselves. You are merciful towards your fellow Muslims. You are not merciful towards non-Muslims. That's not me talking, that's Allah. So if you think that's tolerant, you mean something different from the word tolerance that I would use. Chapter 98, verse 6. Verily those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran, and Prophet Muhammad, from among the people of the Scripture, Jews and Christians, and al-mushrikun, will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures. The Quran calls Christians and Jews the worst of creatures. We're lower than dogs. We're lower than insects. That's what we are. But according to the Quran, chapter 3, verse 110, Muslims are the best of peoples. How are you going to end up with a tolerant society when you're saying that group over there, they're the best of all peoples, and those people over there, they're the worst of creatures? You look at places like Pakistan where some Christian annoys someone or gets on someone's nerve, they'll just accuse the Christian of blasphemy, haul the Christian off to court if they don't end up killing the Christian right there. And we wonder, how could you end up? Well, Allah doesn't care about that Christian. Allah doesn't love that Christian. Allah has nothing but contempt for that evil Christian. Why would you care? Why would you care about that person? He's the worst of creatures. And this is what Theresa Corbin would have found if she'd bothered to actually read the sources, but read something else and concluded that Islam is peaceful and tolerant. And we could go on. We could talk about the Quran commanding Muslims to kill apostates, not very tolerant. We could talk about the Quran the hadith where Muhammad says, so you have multiple hadith where Muhammad says that you have to kill those who leave Islam. We have multiple hadith where Muhammad says that he's been commanded to fight people until they say that there is no God but Allah. We could go through those passages, but you just find more of what's in the Quran over and over and over again. Wherever you go, you don't find anything that's tolerant, not when you understand it in the full context of the Quran. So Muslims are allowed to be tolerant in certain situations, namely if they're outnumbered. But when they actually come to dominate, there's no tolerance involved. So these are the sorts of things you would find if you actually bother to read the sources, but unfortunately not many Muslims do. But think about what we have here. Theresa Corbin doesn't bother to read the Muslim sources. She reads a bunch of nonsense that she's getting from somewhere else, or she's just believing what people tell her to believe. And then, once she's spouting total, complete nonsense about Islam, things that are factually false, if you just open up the Quran and read, you open up the Hadith and read, you find out that what she's saying is false. CNN doesn't bother to challenge any of it. They post the outright nonsense all over their website so that other people say, this is what Islam is. Well, what are you talking about? It's an article by a woman who doesn't have a clue what she's talking about. That's what's being put out there to support Islam. And then more people convert based on this nonsense, and it just keeps snowballing. It's very, very interesting, wild stuff. She continues, as I studied the faith, I was surprised. Many of the tenets resonated with me. I was pleased to find that Islam teaches its adherents to honor all prophets, from Moses to Jesus to Muhammad, all of whom taught mankind to worship one God and to conduct ourselves with a higher purpose. So Islam honors all prophets, and we should ask ourselves, how does Islam honor all prophets? By just saying they're all Muslims, right? Is that really honoring? In other words, let me switch it a little. Suppose I come up to you and I say, I honor Muhammad. I say he was a devout Christian who carried his Bible around and believed that Jesus is the divine Son of God who died on the cross for sins and rose from the dead. So see, I honor him. Would any Muslim think that I'm honoring Muhammad by saying he taught something that he never taught? Would any Muslim think that I'm honoring Muhammad by doing that? No, you'd say you're horribly disrespecting Muhammad by saying things about him that are not true. And yet that's exactly what Islam does. Islam just goes, any person anyone likes in all of history, says, oh, that person was a Muslim too, and pretends that it's respecting these people. Guess what Jesus said? John chapter 5, verses 22 to 23. Jesus says, moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Jesus says you have to honor him the same way you honor the Father. How do you honor the Father? All kinds of ways, but things like worship are part of the way you honor the Father. Jesus says you have to honor him in the same way. And he says that if you don't honor him that way, you are not honoring the Father. So according to Jesus, should you be treating him like some prophet? According to Jesus, are you honoring him by calling him a prophet? No. And so how are you honoring Jesus by completely contradicting his message? We can only wonder. Corbin continues, I was drawn to Islam's appeal to intellect. Catch that? Islam's appeal to intellect. This just got very interesting. I was drawn to Islam's appeal to intellect and heartened by the Prophet Muhammad's quote, The acquisition of knowledge is compulsory for every Muslim, whether male or female. Note that quotation. The acquisition of knowledge is compulsory for every Muslim, whether male or female. This is a classic example of taking something Muhammad said, even though he may not have said it. It's not the strongest hadith. But so we'll just grant what is, according to most Muslim scholars, a weak hadith. Let's say this actually goes back to Muhammad. Taking something that Muhammad said and then giving it a Western interpretation, giving it an interpretation that actually has nothing to do with Islam, and then saying, you see, Muhammad affirms something we like. What do we like? We like the acquisition of knowledge. We believe in learning about the world and science and so on. Muhammad says acquire knowledge. So that fits in with what we believe. He's telling us, hey, everyone needs to go out and seek knowledge. Go learn about the world. Learn about all these things. Isn't that great? You see, that's what Islam does. Islam encourages you to do science and math and all these things. You see that? What a wonderful religion. Now, what did Muhammad actually mean here? Well, let's read what the quotation says. It's from Sunan ibn Majah. Sunan ibn Majah 224. It was narrated that Anas bin Malik said, seeking knowledge is a duty upon every Muslim, and he who imparts knowledge to those who do not deserve it is like one who puts a necklace of jewels, pearls, and gold around the neck of swine. So, seeking knowledge is a duty upon every Muslim, including women. So, all people need to seek knowledge. All Muslims need to seek knowledge. Isn't that a wonderful teaching? Well, since you're quoting Sunan ibn Majah here, let's look at some other passages about what Muhammad said in Sunan ibn Majah about knowledge. Because he doesn't mean what Theresa Corbin thinks he means. He doesn't, and she would know this if she'd read it. She didn't. She read that on some website, or she heard that or saw it in a book or something like that, where it was completely distorted for a Western audience. According to Muhammad, the only useful, beneficial knowledge is religious knowledge. All other knowledge is superfluous. It's not needed. It's not important. Muhammad even asks Allah to rescue him from non-religious knowledge. Let's look at some passages here. Sunan ibn Majah 54. The Messenger of Allah said, knowledge is based on three things. Three kinds of knowledge. Knowledge is based on three things, and anything beyond that is superfluous, not needed. A clear verse, so the Quran, an established sunnah, so something from the hadith about Muhammad's life and practice, or the rulings by which the inheritance is divided fairly. So you've got basically the Quran, the hadith, and rulings on inheritance. Those are the only kinds of beneficial knowledge. Everything else is superfluous. Does that sound like Muhammad's intention is to convey the idea that, oh yeah, we really need to figure out the universe and understand the universe and understand quantum mechanics and relativity? Does that sound like that's what Muhammad is teaching? No. When he says seek knowledge, he's talking about religious knowledge. He's saying, even you Muslim women, you need to know what's in the Quran, because the Quran says a lot about you. You even need to know what's in the hadith when it comes to women, because that's something you need to understand. You need to understand what Islam teaches about you. You need to understand what the penalties are if you disobey your husband. You need to understand your role in the world. You need to understand these things as Muslim, and you need to understand Muslim practices like prayer and things like that. You need to understand these things as women. Is Muhammad saying women need to go out and become scientists and mathematicians? No, that's not what he's saying. He condemns that sort of thing. But that's how Corbin represents it, and that's what CNN puts out on its website. According to CNN, what does Islam teach? Islam teaches you to acquire knowledge, whether you're a man or woman, and that's why feminists should be good Muslims. Very, very interesting, wild stuff here. Sunan ibn Majah, 258. It was narrated from Ibn Umar that the Prophet said, whoever seeks knowledge for a reason other than for the sake of Allah, or intends it for a purpose other than for the sake of Allah, let him take his place in hell. Does Muhammad think that you need to go out and acquire knowledge for the sake of knowledge? No. That's a ticket to hell. The only relevant knowledge is knowledge for Allah, religious knowledge. So the sort of knowledge that Corbin is saying that Islam promotes, and that Islam teaches us to go out and seek, knowledge of the world, knowledge of science, things like that, that's the sort of knowledge Muhammad says, if that's what you're seeking, you're going to hell. So what Muhammad says will get you a ticket to hell. That's what Corbin says, oh, Islam teaches that you need to go out and get that kind of knowledge. Absolute nonsense. She would have found that if she'd actually bothered to read the quotation instead of, again, getting it off some website. Sunan ibn Majah, number 3837. The Messenger of Allah said, "O Allah, I seek refuge with you from four things: from knowledge that is of no benefit, from a heart that does not fear you, from a soul that is never satisfied, and from supplication that is not heard." Muhammad says, I seek refuge with Allah from knowledge that is of no benefit. What sort of knowledge is of no benefit? Non-religious knowledge. He said, here, these are the kinds of knowledge that are beneficial. Quran, Hadith, rules of inheritance. This is beneficial knowledge. Everything else is superfluous. And what does he say? Allah, protect me from that extra knowledge. So again, Theresa Corbin and CNN declare to all of these readers, and I mean, how interesting that, a Muslim feminist, I have to click on that article, and then you actually read the article. What's it say? Oh, Muhammad is promoting the acquisition of knowledge, and it's men and women. We're all going out and we're trying to figure out and understand the world. We're figuring out the laws of nature and so on. That's what Islam teaches. And Muhammad is saying, Allah, protect me from that. Whatever you do, Allah, protect me from that kind of knowledge. All I want to know is, just how I follow you. That's it. Sunan ibn Majah, 3843. It was narrated, the Messenger of Allah said, ask Allah for beneficial knowledge. What sort of knowledge would that be? Religious knowledge. Ask Allah for beneficial knowledge and seek refuge with Allah from knowledge that is of no benefit. Knowledge that is of no benefit. Seek refuge with Allah from knowledge that is of no benefit. So it's not just Muhammad who is saying, hey, he doesn't want knowledge that isn't directly religious in nature. And it's not just him saying, Allah, protect me from that kind of knowledge. He commands his followers, you guys need to be on your guard against knowledge that has nothing to do with this religion. And so what CNN and Theresa Corbin are putting forward as Islamic, namely going out, seeking knowledge about the world, is absolutely condemned in the same collection of ahadith that she's quoting to defend it. So notice, you take a quotation of Muhammad, acquire knowledge. Give it a meaning that Muhammad never intended. He never intended what Theresa Corbin intends by this meaning. What he means is religious knowledge. You ignore all of the passages that show that Muhammad meant something very different from what you said, and then you send it all around the world in order to win more converts to Islam. Oh, surely, we like knowledge, right? We live in a society and a culture that values scientific knowledge and knowledge of all kinds. And so to find out that a religion is calling for that, calling for us to understand the world and to figure out its workings, wow, that's wonderful. It seems very different from ISIS, which is just obsessed with what? Just obsessed with religious knowledge, not interested in anything else. And then you find out, well, which side is actually agreeing with Muhammad. It's not the people who say that this means that we need to seek knowledge in the sense in which we're thinking it means. Muhammad condemns that sort of thing. And so Muhammad means the exact opposite of what CNN and Theresa Corbin are saying. And no one seems to be bothered by the fact that we are getting complete nonsense. Do you understand the problem? This is a news agency, right? This is a news agency. We expect some level of accuracy, and they're telling us things that are exactly the opposite of what's true, so that people have an opinion of Muhammad's teachings that is much better than what it should be, right? So it makes us see Islam in a much more favorable light, but it's based on lies. It's based on outright deception, right? We're supposed to think that Islam is better than it actually is. Well, why? Why not tell us what it actually teaches and then let us form our opinions? Because if you do that, if you actually lay out what Islam teaches, you will be horrified. You will find out that Muhammad condemns the sort of knowledge that we would normally think of in terms of going out and investigating the world. He condemns that sort of thing. You find the passages on intolerance. Don't be friends with Jews and Christians. Fight those who do not believe. You'd find that. So we can't have people believing that that's what Islam teaches. So we'll just say that it promotes tolerance. And of course, since Theresa Corbin is claiming to be a Muslim feminist, if you look at what Islam teaches about women, you would be absolutely horrified. And so we're not going to tell people what Islam teaches about women. We're just going to pretend, hey, if you're a good feminist, Islam is the religion for you. Let's look at a couple of passages and then we'll close out. Jami at-Tirmidhi, 964. When Allah's messenger was asked which woman was best, he replied, the one who pleases her husband when he looks at her, obeys him when he gives a command, and does not go against his wishes regarding her person or property by doing anything of which he disapproves. Is that something that a feminist would ordinarily agree with? Mindless obedience to anything your husband says and be a pretty girl for him. That's the ideal sort of woman. That's what Islam teaches. Chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran. Men are the maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them to excel others and because they spend out of their property. The good women are therefore obedient, guarding the unseen as Allah has guarded. And as to those on whose part you fear desertion, admonish them, leave them alone in sleeping places, and beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek a way against them. Surely Allah is high. Great. So beat your wives into submission if they get out of line. And we see this happening over and over again in the Muslim sources. Muhammad hit Aisha. Everyone is beating Aisha left and right. You have, very interestingly, Aisha herself, in Sahih al-Bukhari 5825, say, I have not seen any woman suffering as much as the believing women. She said this in response to a woman who'd been beaten so severely her skin turned green. Aisha comes to Muhammad because she thinks Muhammad might grant some sort of justice. She says, I haven't seen any woman suffering as much as believing women, Muslim women. She's saying that Muslim women were treated worse than pagan women. This is Aisha, who's given the title the mother of the faithful, Muhammad's favorite wife. Muhammad, instead of rebuking the woman's husband or punishing him, instead rebukes the woman for being a bad wife. Is that what a feminist should be promoting as the ideal religion for women? Chapter 4, verse 3 of the Quran talks about marrying up to 4 women. Do women get to marry up to 4 husbands? No. Is this a religion of equality? No. Chapter 2, verse 223, your wives are as a tilth unto you, so approach your tilth how you will. Your field, your tilth is a field that you plow into. Plow into your wives however you want. They're yours. They're your fields. This is some very interesting stuff. Sahih Muslim 3366. Allah's messenger said, by him in whose hand is my life. When a man calls his wife to bed and she does not respond, the one who is in heaven is displeased with her until her husband is pleased with her. So we could just go on with this, and you know, we have programs where we go through what Islam teaches about women. The point is, if you read what CNN promotes as Islam, it's almost exactly the opposite of what you get about Islam from the Muslim sources. And so we are in an atmosphere and an environment where the most popular news networks and news channels are just giving us flat out nonsense, telling us it's Islam. Meanwhile, Orthodox Islam is subjugating women, subjugating unbelievers, condemning anything except religious knowledge, doing exactly what Islam commands, while the Western media and westernized Muslims who don't seem to understand Islam at all tell us what Islam is supposed to teach but doesn't actually teach. And they tell us that so that we don't actually get to criticize what Islam actually says. In other words, the people who are actually carrying out what Islam says, it's horrifying, but we're kept from actually addressing the problem by Western apologists and the media telling us things about Islam that just aren't true.